The first sound wasn't her voice. It was the sharp crack of a folder snapping shut. Then came the words that sliced through the boardroom like broken glass. Effective immediately, Andrew Sullivan, Chief Systems Architect, is terminated. For a heartbeat, nobody moved. Charts froze on the projector. Pens hovered above notebooks. And at the head of the table, Jessica Morgan, our newly crowned CEO, delivered my execution with the calm detachment of a surgeon removing a tumor. She didn't flinch, didn't even look at me directly. To her, I was just an obstacle to remove. I'm Andrew Sullivan, 49 years old, and I'd just been fired from the company I'd spent 8 years building from the ground up. The humiliation wasn't private, it was a spectacle. Every director, every VP in the room watched as I was erased from the equation. Still, I didn't give Jessica the satisfaction of an outburst. I gathered my notes, lifted my chin, and said one word that seemed to unsettle the silence. Thank you. A few people shifted uncomfortably, mistaking it for surrender. But it wasn't surrender at all. They had no idea what they'd just handed me. Let me back up for a minute. As Chief Systems Architect, I wasn't just some guy with a fancy title. I was the backbone of this company. For 8 years, I'd been the one who built our modular platform line by line. I was the one who coded through power outages, who negotiated survival when budgets collapsed, who made our $180 million flagship platform possible. I'd carried the late nights, skipped family barbecues, missed my daughter's soccer games, all to prove that the work we did in that cramped lab mattered more than the empty presentations upstairs. Jessica had none of that weight on her shoulders. Her resume was slides and buzzwords, polished in consulting firms where nothing real was ever built. She walked into the CEO chair armed with MBA jargon, synergy, streamlining, low-hanging fruit, as if words could replace the years I'd carved into steel and silicon. She was drunk on her own authority, blind to the substance beneath the surface. That morning crystallized the truth for me. Jessica thought firing me was efficient management. She thought she'd won some kind of corporate chess game. But while the board stared at me like I was roadkill, I felt something sharper than anger. Certainty. The certainty that I'd prepared for exactly this kind of betrayal. And Jessica Morgan, CEO or not, had no clue how much power she'd just handed back to me. The silence followed me like a shadow. It stretched down the hallway, into the elevator, out to the parking lot where I sat gripping my steering wheel long after the engine should have started. For 8 years, I'd been the anchor that kept this ship steady in rough waters. In less than a minute, Jessica had cut me loose in front of the very people who'd once called me indispensable. What I didn't expect was how fast the chaos would ripple through my team. By the next morning, my phone was lighting up with messages. Not support, confusion. Kevin wrote, "Are we even allowed to keep working on the code?" Ashley added, "HR says everything's paused until new leadership is confirmed." Ryan, always the cynic, just messaged, "Guess we're all disposable now." Their words bled exhaustion and disbelief. These were some of the brightest engineers I'd ever worked with, and suddenly they sounded like soldiers abandoned mid-battle. I stared at each text, my chest tight. The emptiness was brutal. I'd fought so hard to protect them, to carve out a space where creativity could thrive, where deadlines didn't crush souls. Now they were drifting, untethered, wondering if their careers had just collapsed overnight because of one executive's ego trip. Guilt ate at me. Had I failed them? Had my silence in that boardroom condemned us all? For the first time in years, I questioned my own instincts. Maybe Jessica was right. Maybe leadership really could be replaced by someone with the right smile and the right connections. Then at 3:00 p.m., my phone buzzed again. This time it was Jason, the intern, 22 years old, supposed to know nothing beyond QA protocols and bug reports. His text was short, almost casual. "They don't know who holds the original patent, do they?" I froze. My heart hammered against my ribs. Of all people, Jason had glimpsed the truth. The silence that had felt like a tomb suddenly cracked open. He was right. They didn't know. Jessica didn't know. The board didn't know. Not one of them understood that during the budget cuts 2 years earlier, I'd secured the modular patent under a separate entity, Sullivan Tech Solutions. The original design, the licensing rights, the framework that powered everything, none of it was sitting in company vaults. It was all mine. For a moment, the emptiness eased. Doubt still lingered, but beneath it sparked something I hadn't felt since the firing: leverage. Jason's question reminded me the game wasn't over. In fact, it had barely begun. That night, my apartment looked more like a war room than a home. Contracts, binders, and notes were stacked across my kitchen table, spilling onto the floor in uneven piles. The lamp flickered overhead, casting long shadows over the mess. I could almost picture Jessica in her glass office across town, sipping something expensive while rehearsing sound bites for tomorrow's investor call. She had the corner office view. I had peeling paint and coffee-stained papers. The contrast was almost funny. I sat there wrapped in silence, the kind that presses against your chest and makes the air feel heavier. My phone buzzed occasionally with another anxious message from the engineers, but I didn't answer. I didn't have comfort to give. All I had were these files I'd dragged from storage boxes, remnants of every contract negotiation, every budget meeting, every moment I'd fought tooth and nail to keep our project alive. The loneliness was sharp. I'd given 8 years of my life to this company, and they'd discarded me like a broken circuit board. The thought clawed at me. Maybe they were right, maybe I was done. But every time that doubt whispered, another voice pushed back. The one that had kept me awake through all-nighters, that had fought through budget cuts, that refused to let my work vanish under someone else's name. My eyes burned as I flipped through folder after folder. It felt pointless, like digging through ashes. Until I opened one yellowed envelope tucked beneath a stack of quarterly reports. Inside was a printed email time-stamped 2 years earlier. I remembered it instantly. Finance had announced a budget realignment. Translation: our team was about to be gutted. That was the night I'd stayed up until dawn drafting an alternate plan, one that routed our modular system through a separate legal entity. My pulse quickened as I read the words again, slower this time, letting each sentence cut through the fog of exhaustion. Buried halfway down was a clause so ordinary it looked almost harmless. In the event of termination of project funding or leadership oversight, all rights revert to the original architect until full reintegration. I set the paper down, hands trembling. That was it, the thread nobody else had noticed. Jessica thought stripping me of my title gave her control. She thought public humiliation erased years of preparation. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that firing me had triggered the very clause that placed the patent squarely back in my hands. The room was still small, still cluttered, still suffocating. But suddenly it felt less like a prison and more like a command center. Alone? Yes. Exhausted? Absolutely. But beneath the ache sat something harder, sharper: resolve. They'd just handed me the key to their kingdom. The first crack in Jessica's empire arrived on a Thursday morning exactly 9 days after my firing. I wasn't there in person, but I didn't need to be. Word travels fast in tech, faster when something goes wrong in front of money. Investors had flown in from 3 cities, squeezed into our sleek glass auditorium for the highly choreographed product demo. Jessica had promised them a flawless performance, the kind of show that convinces cautious men in suits to loosen the strings on billion-dollar checks. Instead, what they got was silence. The demo dashboard lit up, flickered, then froze on a single line of text glowing in sterile gray. License authorization expired. At first, nobody understood what it meant. The room buzzed with polite confusion, the kind that usually smooths over small technical glitches. Jessica forced a laugh and waved to the engineering team at the back. Just a hiccup, she called out. 2 minutes. But 2 minutes turned into 10. 10 into 20. Every click produced the same result. License authorization expired. I was at home in my cramped apartment watching updates roll in through a private Slack channel my old team still hadn't removed me from. Kevin typed, "They're sweating. Ops can't access staging." Ashley added a single emoji. A lock. I leaned back in my chair, the corners of my mouth tugging upward despite myself. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. The slip. In the middle of the confusion, Nicole, the director of operations, raised her voice over the nervous whispers. "Wait," she said, holding a tablet aloft. "Are we saying we've actually lost control of the platform?" The words sliced through the room. Investors turned their heads in unison, eyes narrowing. Jessica's smile cracked, the carefully polished mask faltering. For the first time, she looked less like a CEO and more like a child caught stealing cookies. "Of course not," she stammered, tugging at her cufflinks. "We have redundancies. Everything's fine. But her voice betrayed her. It wavered on the last syllable, just enough to send a ripple of doubt through the crowd. I imagined her then, standing in her tailored suit under harsh auditorium lights, sweat gathering beneath her collar, while executives whispered and investors checked their watches. And me? I sat miles away in a second-hand chair at my cluttered table, feeling a quiet current of triumph pulse through my veins. This was the power of preparation, the reward for reading every line of every contract when nobody else bothered. They thought firing me had ended the story. They didn't realize that cutting me loose had triggered the very clause that turned their system into a locked vault, one only I could open. I didn't gloat aloud, didn't post cryptic messages online. I simply folded my arms, breathed in the silence of my apartment, and let the satisfaction settle deep in my chest. For the first time since that boardroom ambush, I didn't feel erased. I felt inevitable. The day after the demo collapsed, my phone rang with a number I recognized. Human Resources. I almost didn't answer. Part of me wanted to let it buzz into silence, to remind them I owed them nothing. But curiosity tugged harder. What excuse would they spin now? "Andrew?" The voice chirped, polished and overly cheerful. "How are you holding up? We've been so concerned." Concerned? The word landed like a bad joke. Where was their concern when Jessica cut me down in front of the board? Where was it when my team spiraled into panic? "I'm fine," I said flatly. Good, good." She rushed on as if afraid I'd hang up. "Listen, the last few days have been challenging, but leadership's been talking, and we feel it would be mutually beneficial if you came back. We'd love to restore continuity." I closed my eyes, letting the words wash over me. Mutually beneficial. Restore continuity. Pretty phrases wrapped around desperation. They weren't calling because they valued me. They were calling because they were drowning. I pictured Jessica pacing in her corner office, demanding HR fix this mess. They probably rehearsed this call, choosing phrases that sounded warm but not apologetic, urgent but not desperate. What they didn't realize was that every syllable dripped with fear. "You want me back?" I said evenly. "Well, yes," she said quickly. "The investors are unsettled and the team clearly respects you. This is about stability. We'd be happy to discuss adjustments to your compensation." There it was. The bait. Money. The universal bandage they thought could patch any wound. They believed I could be bought. That my silence, my loyalty, my architecture could be sold back to them with the right number of zeros. I almost laughed. Instead, I let the silence stretch until she shifted uncomfortably. Then I spoke slowly, carefully, each word sharpened to a blade. "You don't have enough money," I said. She stammered. I'm sorry?" "You don't have enough money to buy back the truth," I continued. "Not the sleepless nights. Not the years I spent protecting a system your executives never understood. Not the patent you tried to bury. And certainly not my silence." The line went quiet. I could hear her breathing, quick and shallow, searching for a script that didn't exist. For the first time since Jessica's ambush, I felt no trace of doubt, only clarity. They wanted me back because they finally understood. The foundation was mine, not theirs. I ended the call before she could recover. No shouting, no gloating, just a clean break, my voice steady, my hands calm. They thought power lived in the CEO's office, but that day, I knew the truth. Power lived in the refusal to be bought. 2 days after I hung up on HR, an email slipped into my inbox with a subject line that made me pause. Invitation to discuss strategic alignment. The sender wasn't from my old company. It was a name I hadn't seen in years. Scott Williams, Quantum Dynamics, one of our fiercest competitors. I stared at it for a long minute, my finger hovering over delete. It smelled too convenient, too perfectly timed. The system had barely stumbled, the board was scrambling, and now a rival wanted a conversation. Red flags everywhere. Still, curiosity is stubborn. I opened it. The message was short, almost cryptic. "We understand the current turbulence. If you're open to dialogue, we'd like to meet. Scott Williams." The name hit me like a memory jolt. He'd been one of ours once, a senior engineer with a sharp mind and sharper tongue. Years ago, Jessica had dismissed him in a restructuring, calling him unmanageable. Scott had laughed bitterly, said Jessica wouldn't know innovation if it bit her, and walked out. Now here he was, representing quantum. My instinct screamed caution. Rivals don't reach out of kindness, they reach for leverage. Still, I agreed to coffee in a quiet cafe downtown, the kind of place where the music was soft and the staff didn't eavesdrop. Scott looked older, lines carved around his eyes, but his grin was the same, half amusement, half challenge. "Andrew Sullivan," he said, sliding into the booth across from me. "Didn't think I'd see the day you'd be on the outside looking in." "Life surprises," I answered evenly. He chuckled. "Jessica always did have a talent for driving out the ones who actually matter. First me, now you. Though I'd say you built a hell of a lot more before she shoved you aside." I studied him, searching for the angle. "You didn't ask me here to reminisce." "You're right," Scott said, leaning in. "Quantum wants what you built. We've followed the fallout. Investors whisper, clients doubt. But you and I both know the system doesn't move without you." My pulse quickened, but I kept my expression still. "What makes you so sure?" That grin again, sharper this time. He pulled a tablet from his bag, slid it across. On the screen was a copy of my old licensing document, the same contract I'd drafted 2 years earlier. He tapped a clause highlighted in yellow. "Jessica doesn't know, does she, that you're the only one who can activate the modules. Without you, it's just a shell." For a moment, the cafe noise dimmed. I glanced at the words I already knew by heart. Clause 7.2.1. My oversight clause. Scott sat back, satisfied. "So, Andrew, the question isn't whether the system works. It's whether you want it to work for them or for someone else." I sipped my coffee, masking the storm inside. Caution coiled tight around my ribs, but beneath it curiosity flickered. For the first time, someone outside my old company was speaking the truth aloud. And that changed everything. The morning headlines almost made me laugh. "Company restores stability. System back online." Jessica must have fed the story to the press herself, plastering her face across every outlet as the savior who tamed the storm. She strutted before the board that day, declaring the system fully restored thanks to heroic efforts from DevOps. She spoke with clipped confidence, as if the clause I'd written 2 years earlier didn't exist. For a few hours, people believed her. The board stopped panicking. Investors relaxed. Even some of my old team messaged me in confusion. "Did she actually fix it?" Kevin asked. Ashley sent a question mark, nothing more. I stared at the screen, my stomach tight. Jessica was playing with illusions, and illusions are dangerous when left unchallenged. But I knew better. A system isn't restored by ignoring contracts or pretending licenses don't matter. Whatever she was running was a facade, a hollow shell designed to fool those who didn't know where to look. Then, less than 24 hours later, it happened. At exactly 9:17 a.m., the system collapsed again. Not a hiccup, not a temporary freeze, complete failure. Demo environments, client sandboxes, even the investor testbed went dark. Screens across the building lit up with the same line, "License authorization expired." Inside the company offices, panic erupted. I heard about it through Ryan, who sent me a frantic message. "She's losing it. They can't access anything, not even staging." By mid-morning, the news had leaked. Reporters who'd praised Jessica hours earlier were now circling like sharks, questioning how a supposedly restored platform could fail so catastrophically. In the boardroom, chaos reigned. Jessica tried to bluff, shouting about sabotage and technical glitches, but the faces staring back weren't buying it anymore. Someone demanded proof. Someone else demanded logs. That's when the truth cracked open. The so-called fix she'd paraded was nothing more than a shallow demo environment. No real functionality, no legal authorization, nothing sustainable. A senior director finally said it aloud. "You misled us. This wasn't a restoration. It was theater." Jessica's face drained of color. The board's patience, already thin, snapped. Investors began pulling calls. Partners froze negotiations. The woman who'd sauntered into her CEO role full of swagger now looked like a cornered animal. Eyes darting, sweat gathering along her collar. I sat in my apartment watching it unfold through updates and whispers, the chaos rippling outward. For the first time, it wasn't my chaos to carry. It was hers. The system was doing exactly what it was designed to do, protect itself from hands that didn't belong. And Jessica Morgan had just been unmasked as a fraud in front of everyone who'd once believed her. Meanwhile, my phone buzzed with a new message from Scott. Quantum Board approved preliminary discussions, $1.1 billion starting offer, plus CTO position with full autonomy. Your team included if they're interested. I read it twice. Kevin, Ashley, Ryan, they could all come with me. The engineers who'd stood by me when the company turned its back. Scott wasn't just offering me an escape. He was offering redemption for all of us. I typed back, "Let's talk details." The game was about to change completely. And this time, I'd be the one writing the rules. When the call from the board came, I wasn't surprised. The system's second collapse had left them no choice. What did surprise me was how quickly the tone shifted from dismissive to desperate. They wanted me in the executive chamber by morning. I arrived early, walking past walls where employees pretended not to stare. The air felt charged, like everyone was waiting for a verdict. Inside the boardroom, the atmosphere was brittle. Half the directors were red-faced with frustration, the other half pale with fear. And Jessica, the woman who'd humiliated me in front of this very table, stood near the doorway like a guard dog trembling on its leash. "Andrew," she began, voice cracking just enough to betray her. "There's no need for this. The situation's under control." "You don't sit down, Jessica," one director snapped. She flinched but didn't move. I didn't spare her a glance. My focus was on the long table, the rows of faces suddenly stripped of arrogance. "Thank you for coming," the chairman said carefully, as if each word might fracture. "We'd like to discuss a path forward." I placed my folder on the table, deliberately calm. "I'm not here to ask for my job back," I said. "Let's make that clear." A murmur swept the room. They expected bargaining, maybe an apology, maybe a demand for compensation. Instead, I kept my voice level, my gaze steady. "I will not return to this company. I will not restore your access. What I will do is sell the patent." The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut skin. One director dropped his pen, another inhaled too loudly. The chairman's jaw locked, struggling to process what he'd just heard. Jessica finally found her voice, almost shrieking, "You can't! You don't have the authority!" But the documents in front of me said otherwise. Their signatures, their approvals, their oversight lapses, every detail etched in black and white. The truth was undeniable, and they knew it. I leaned back in my chair, the chill of certainty filling the room. This isn't a negotiation. It's an outcome. The chairman's face went gray. "Andrew, please, we can work something out. Name your price. Full restoration, profit sharing, equity." "You're not listening," I interrupted. "I already have a buyer. Quantum Dynamics, $1.1 billion. Papers are being drawn up as we speak." The room erupted. Directors shouted over each other. Jessica slammed her hand on the table. "This is sabotage! This is corporate espionage!" "No," I said quietly, and somehow my voice cut through the chaos. "This is what happens when you fire the person who actually built what you're selling." 2 hours later, I walked into Quantum Dynamics' marble lobby for the final time. The building hummed with quiet efficiency, the sound of people who weren't scrambling to cover up disasters. Scott was waiting with a team of lawyers, and the contract spread across a mahogany table that could have doubled as a landing strip. But what struck me most were the three familiar faces in the corner: Kevin, Ashley, and Ryan. "They asked to be here," Scott said, following my gaze. "Wanted to see history made." Kevin stepped forward first. "We put in our resignations this morning," he said. "All of us. If you'll have us at Quantum." Ashley nodded. "We built that system with you, Andrew. Seems right we should see where it goes next." Ryan, ever the pragmatist, just shrugged. Plus, Quantum's offering a 40% raise and actual stock options. No brainer. I felt something tight in my chest loosen. These weren't just my engineers anymore. They were my team, following me into whatever came next. The signing took 20 minutes, $1.1 billion transferred to my accounts, patents reassigned to Quantum Dynamics, and a CTO contract with my name on it, plus hiring authority for my entire former team. But the real satisfaction came 3 hours later, when the news broke. Tech giant collapses after losing core patent. CEO Jessica Morgan resigns in disgrace. Employee exodus following leadership crisis. The stock price didn't just fall, it cratered. from $180 per share to $12 in a single trading session. Investors demanded congressional hearings. The SEC opened an investigation into Jessica's false statements about the system restoration. By evening, Jessica Morgan had been escorted from the building by security. The board voted her out unanimously, but not before she'd become the face of corporate incompetence across every major news outlet. The video of her final press conference went viral within hours. Standing behind a podium, her usual confidence completely gone, stammering through a resignation speech while reporters shouted questions about fiduciary duty and shareholder fraud. "I take full responsibility," she kept repeating, but her voice cracked each time. The woman who'd fired me with surgical precision now couldn't string together a coherent sentence. Meanwhile, my phone buzzed with interview requests. TechCrunch wanted the inside story. Forbes was preparing a cover feature. LinkedIn had already updated my profile to CTO, Quantum Dynamics, and the congratulations were pouring in. But the message that meant the most came from Jason, the 22-year-old intern who'd first asked about the patents. "Saw the news, you did it, respect." 3 months later, I stood on the stage at the National Technology Conference, accepting the Industry Innovation Award. The auditorium was packed with 2,000 engineers, executives, and journalists, the same crowd that would have ignored me when I was just another corporate employee. "Innovation isn't about having the right connections," I told them, looking out at the sea of faces. "It's about preparation meeting opportunity. And sometimes opportunity comes disguised as betrayal." The applause lasted 90 seconds. But what I remember most was seeing Kevin, Ashley, and Ryan in the front row, along with Scott and the entire quantum leadership team, the people who'd bet on substance over style, experience over buzzwords. After the ceremony, a young engineer approached me. Couldn't have been older than 25, fresh out of college. "Mr. Sullivan," he said nervously, "I'm starting my first job next week. Any advice?" I thought about Jessica, about boardroom betrayals and patent clauses, about 8 years of building something only to have it stolen, about the night I sat alone in my apartment wondering if I was finished. "Document everything," I told him. "Read every contract, and never ever let someone else control what you create." He nodded eagerly, pulled out his phone to take notes. "One more thing," I added. "When they try to erase you, that's usually when you know you've built something worth fighting for." 6 months after that boardroom ambush, I wasn't just vindicated. I was in charge of a $3 billion technology division with 400 engineers under my leadership. Jessica Morgan's name had become synonymous with executive failure. My former company had been sold for parts to 3 different buyers. And every morning when I walked into my corner office at Quantum Dynamics, past the patents hanging on my wall, I remembered that moment when I whispered thank you in that boardroom. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. It's proving them wrong so completely that history forgets they ever doubted you.